We need every single second of this next 50 minutes or so to get into this conversation. My name is Steve. I'm a senior strategist at an organization called Dream Machine Innovation Lab. And we get to figure out how to make AI inclusive and solve all the challenges in this next 45 minutes. It's totally possible. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves real quick. We have an incredible conversation. So let's start with Chike.
Everyone, good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning. It's good. It's amazing to be here. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much to my amazing co-panelists. And can we just clap for Operation Hope, all the organizers. One, for this amazing conference, but secondly, to create space for this. So my name is Chike Agu. Currently, I'm the head of innovation and strategy for the K4 Center out in the Bay Area, and was the former chief innovation officer at the U.S. Department of Labor in the Biden administration. And so what I will try and do is maybe do a little bit of setup for my far more brilliant and amazing colleagues to talk about artificial intelligence, what it is, how it really plays in granular detail. But I want to say a couple of things about artificial intelligence to kind of start us off and set the right context. I think number one, artificial intelligence is not new. If you have applied for a loan, or if you have applied for a job in the last 15 years, artificial intelligence was used and used on you. So that's one important thing to know and understand. When you got that automated email back, that was not a human being. If no one told you, that was a machine. Number two, there are a few things that are different about artificial intelligence than other technologies we've seen in past. The first thing is that this is, one can argue, the first what we call general purpose, meaning widespread technology that was not created via government research. Different than the internet, different than electricity, different than telephones. It kind of came out in some ways out of nowhere. I was in government when ChatGPT kind of came out, and trust me, we didn't know. What's also different is the speed. So let's just use three different technologies and look at how long it took each one to reach 100 million people. Electricity and telephones took 80 years to reach 100 million people. 80 years. The internet, which most of us will remember that rollout, that took a little under 8 years to reach 100 million people. Generative AI, as measured by ChatGPT, reached 100 million people in 8 weeks. The speed is different. Thirdly, what I like to say is that the promise and the peril of this technology are both real. If people who don't recognize that are not being honest with you, there's huge promise. There's an author at Harvard Business School, Jeff Busgang, who writes a book called The Experimentation Machine, and he writes about how an entrepreneur who uses AI is 10 times more effective, as measured by revenue, as measured by impact, measured by profit, than someone who doesn't. And when you think about the application of AI for an entrepreneur, particularly entrepreneurs who look like the people who are in this room, it can reduce the amount of capital that you need to start your business, which we know is a huge barrier to a lot of people who look like the people in this room from starting those businesses. The peril is also real. I've seen you and your boss on panels with AI-powered tools that can't, frankly, identify, distinguish between a black face and a white face. We have seen AI-driven algorithms that, frankly, are making life and death judgments in criminal justice. We have seen, as someone who worked at the Department of Labor, huge discrepancies in terms of how these tools manifest in hiring, where people with the same skills, frankly, just don't make it through because of things that are not related to their skills. And this is just the beginning. The promise and the peril are both real. The last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to be quiet for smarter people to talk, is it's important we get this moment right. If you want to think about relating this to the internet, and I was saying this to my co-panelists, if you want to relate this to the internet, we are in the equivalent of 1997. This is how early we are, which means we have an opportunity to change the direction of where we are going. But we need to get this right because we're going to have to do this playbook again. When I worked in the Biden administration, every single year the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy released a list called the Critical and Emerging Technology List, basically of all the technologies we thought were critical for American national security and that would define the future. It is a 4-page, single-sided PDF form. Artificial intelligence is just one bullet. There are technologies that are coming where we'll have to repeat this playbook over and over again in terms of social justice, in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of national security, and we've got to get it right now because we're going to have to do it again and again and again over your lifetime, your kid's lifetime, and your grandkids' lifetime. So this moment is so important because we are so early, and the people who are going to define whether it turns out the way we want it to or it turns out in a way that we don't are the people who are in this room and people like you.
All right, mic drop moment. I think GK said it all. I'm Chelsea Rossellis. I'm part of Cisco. I'm part of Brian Tippin's Social Impact and Inclusion team. And I lead inclusive AI as well as a program called the Proximity Initiative. And so part of my work in inclusive AI at Cisco is really getting to be that person who talks to people about the actual concerns they have, right? I think when there's so much of a push for AI, people feel like there's no one saying, hey, that concern is real, right? When you're worried about things like bias, when you're worried about things like environmental impacts, those are legitimate concerns, and let's talk about it and problem solve together. So that's my favorite part of my job, is getting to problem solve with our people about how we can all be better decision makers around AI and be really thoughtful about it.
Well said. Well, morning, everyone. I'm Alyssa Cottingham with Truist Bank, and we are really excited to be here with you all. I know you've seen a lot of the purple power across the room, and we're going to bring that energy in here. When I think about AI, I think about it as a tool in our toolkit. It's not a magic, it's not a menace, it's not anything to be scared of. It's something that we all can use to our advantage. What that means is that we have to have the appropriate success system built, the guardrails in place, the thought process, the ability to really think creatively outside of the box to bring these solutions to bear for our clients and for our teammates and for each other. So excited for today.
So I get to do some amazing work every day where we are crafting educational opportunities for people on the ground in communities, people that look like us, for many of those people to have their first real touch with artificial intelligence. We're meeting up at community libraries and community centers and giving people really high quality training around how they could be using AI tools to write, to make marketing plans, to create images and videos for their businesses, things that really become a game changer for people the next day. But also, I think that the most impactful part of what we get to do is that we have conversations about what's going on. For many people in our community, I can hop in an Uber and ask my driver, like, hey, what do you think about AI? And a lot of the time I hear the same thing. Hey, that AI taking over, right? We've all had that conversation. We often don't get to get much deeper than that. But us being in person and being able to have real conversations around what's happening, how it's impacting us, we uncover that there is a lot of emotion that we have, a lot of confusion that we have, and we're really trying to figure this thing out. So I just want to take a temperature check in the room today. Let's just do show of hands. I'm going to ask a couple of questions so that the panelists here can get a good idea of where the room is at. Raise your hand if you're excited about AI. Okay. Raise your hand if you're a little bit concerned about AI. Okay. Raise your hand if it feels like it's moving pretty quickly and you are using some tools, but you're just having a hard time keeping up with what's happening with AI. Okay. Raise your hand if you're hearing about an AI bubble and you think that the whole economy might crash sometime. Anybody? That's going around too? Okay, cool. There's a lot that we need to talk about here, and I'm very excited to do it. And so, but I think that a really great place to start this conversation is just a level set with a question that I'll ask Chelsea and Alyssa. What is AI?
I'll kick us off here. So AI, I really want to demystify AI. And Chelsea's got some thoughts around artificial intelligence and really kind of what those words mean. But AI is a spectrum of solutions that have been built that range from what, when I was cutting my teeth as an analyst, logistic regression models, just some fancy statistical tools, all the way up to more large language models that we see now that can help with reasoning and context. And that includes more of this cutting edge of agentic AI, which is a really exciting space that can really be a game changer for a lot of individuals. But I really want to take it back to what Chike mentioned, which is we all have been impacted or have used AI on a consistent basis. The Uber drivers that you're talking to, they're using AI. The Roomba vacuum or whatever kind of automated vacuum you might have at home, that is using AI. A lot of the solutions that you use every single day are artificial intelligence, down to machine learning solutions that have been around for 20 plus years, that analysts have coded and built into a system, all the way up to these agentic tools. So it's really a wide spectrum. What I also want to stress is that within that, the maturity is different at different levels of AI. And that maturity includes the guardrails, the systems and the governance that we put in place, and the trust that we can have in these assets and solutions and how much oversight they really need. So that's kind of how I would frame the spectrum of AI. Chelsea, what would you add there?
Yeah, I think the reason, part of why there is such a spectrum is because artificial intelligence, as a term scientifically, is actually incredibly imprecise, right? Artificial, okay, we know what that means, but what is intelligence, right? How do we define intelligence? And so AI is really any machine that can replicate a form of human intelligence, language, reasoning, art, right? But I think it's important to remember that it's not thinking. It'll appear like it's thinking, but it's not. It's a predictive machine. It is a pattern matching machine. So has anyone used ChatGPT or Gemini or any of those models recently? Okay, so when you ask a prompt, when you give it a question, the way that it responds isn't that it goes out and finds the most factual information to respond to you. What it does is it gives you the most likely response to your question. Its goal is to give you the answer that you want. And so literally, token by token, or word by word, essentially, what it does is it says, what's the most likely next word? So if you asked it what goes well with peanut butter, it's gonna look across the internet and say, okay, what's the most likely pair, right? So it's really a prediction engine, and so it's important to remember, again, that it's not thinking, it's prediction, again, exceptionally powerful in the applications of it, all of these wide applications you talked about, but it's pattern matching at the core of it.
And I think it also could be powerful to offer a few metaphors, right? How do you all see it? Is AI like the internet? Is AI like electricity? We know that this is a massive update to our lives, but how would you frame the level of change that we're going through with this massive adoption of artificial intelligence that's happening right now?
Yeah, I think I can start us off here. I see AI as being one of the greatest inventions that my children will see in their lifetime. For me, it was the internet. I don't know if you all remember the sound that you heard when you logged into the internet. My kids do not know that sound. But yes, that's right. That's
beep,
right.
beep, beep.
So that was the greatest invention of my lifetime. I think for my kids, it is going to be artificial intelligence. It is going to be Gen AI. But more importantly, it's how it gets used, right? So the internet wouldn't be important if we didn't actually use it. It's going to be the same thing with AI. So it's how we choose to use it and engage that will make the difference for the next generation to come. I think you could say the same thing for electricity, as well as other inventions, the bicycle, the wheel, all of these great assets that have come along. I do think that it is important to remember that we decide how and where we're going to use these tools. As Chike mentioned, the pace of play here is much faster. So we are moving at a faster pace, but because of the onset of the internet and the access that we have, we actually see a better equalization. So because of this tool, it can actually provide better opportunity, better leapfrog moments for individuals to really catapult to the next level.
Chike, can you speak a little bit more about how you see the impact on the workforce? That's something that people are thinking about in the room right now.
This is another place where artificial intelligence is different than most other technologies. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at most new technologies over history, if you look at the effect they have on the workforce, the lives that they really change are usually people, frankly, who do repetitive tasks and people who work with their bodies. So if you think about automation broadly in factories, the people whose lives were most disrupted were people who, frankly, hey, you were carrying stuff across the factory floor, you were looking at widgets, so on and so forth, and slowly robotics took some of that. Or when you think about, and let's not think about this as a technology, but think about outsourcing. If you were someone who did a call center in the US, that was outsourced to somewhere, whether it be in India or South Asia, a repetitive task. What's different now is that the middle, what we think of as the middle of the workforce actually, is that who's generally never have been affected by technology rollouts is being affected. I tell people, if you read and write for a living, you need to think about what is your value in the market. So when you look at, when I used to work at Accenture, we did what we called an AI risk exposure by occupation. We basically said, let's list all the occupations that are in the Department of Labor database, and let's create an index for who is most at risk. The safest occupation in the age of AI is agriculture. And it makes sense. Generally, this is still a physical task that requires bodies. There's a reason that driving, even though at some point this century driving will be at risk from autonomous vehicles, we're not there yet, because right now the robotics plus the AI is not quite good at simulating human motor function. If you're a paralegal, if you're an accountant, if you're a copy editor, I can name the professions, people who generally thought that their jobs were safe, you have to think hard about what is my value add. Doesn't mean that you don't have value add, but if all you do is read and write, your value to the market is going to change. So I think that's number one. I think number two, if each of you was hiring someone in a job and they told you, hey, I don't know how to use Microsoft Office, or they told you I don't know how to use a Google Doc, you would say, you're not ready to work. We are in this place with generative AI. Accenture, I think as well as McKinsey, they did a study and they said, and they looked at what are the efficiency effects of a worker using AI. The average worker is saving today, in 1997 of AI, 90 minutes a day using these tools. You're telling me that someone comes to you and says, I don't have 90 minutes of productivity for you compared to somebody else, I'm not hiring you. So the issue is everyone in this room, no matter what you do or who you are, has to learn to use these tools, because the person who can is going to beat you. I think the last piece, and I do think the thing that is so different about this is that what does make AI a little different, and again, I'm looking to the technologist to my left, the internet and the tools on it only went as far as the people who program them can go. If the code didn't say X, it didn't do X. The thing about AI, which is different, is it does things that even the creators can't totally explain. So I always remember this one example from Wired magazine when they were testing Copilot. Copilot is effectively the OpenAI infused tool in Microsoft Office. They had a document, and they basically said, hey, read this document, give me a summary. The tool did that. And then they changed the way they asked the question, and they said, hey, as a friend, can you read this document and give me a summary? It's really important if you do this well. And it gave a different answer. I can't explain to you, and neither can the people at Microsoft explain to you why it did that, but it did. And this is I don't want to call it a black box, but there are things that it does, and again, I'm looking at the technologist to my left, that we can't quite understand, which makes it in some ways hard as a worker for you to understand. And so the one thing I always say to people, the workers who are trying to learn, is the biggest thing about that I have seen, which was really generative AI, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, it's you're in a conversation. Think about it not as a question answer, but I'm having a conversation with a tool. It's going to give you a thing initially you don't want, or it's going to be wrong, and you got to go back and forth and learn how to ask it the right question. This is the prompt engineering kind of set of skills to get to where you want to go. And I think in that iterative process is where humans can have the enduring value. How do you know how to have that conversation with this tool? And that's what it is, as my colleagues said. But I think these are the effects that we're going to see. People in the middle are going to be affected in ways we've never seen. We are going to need a more massive worker upskilling across the entire economy than we've ever seen to use these tools. And then lastly, almost no one totally understands these tools, even the people who built them. Therefore, it's going to require a level of cognition we've seen in workers that we've never had to have, because we kind of knew how to use everything else because at least someone could tell us.
And so these black boxes, as you're describing them, are filled with data. And so we're having a conversation about the workforce right now and the impacts there, but also these large language models are becoming infused into the way that whole industries work. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that data. And Chelsea, I'm wondering if you could talk about what happens when bias data enters these systems and what are the impacts that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, absolutely. This is my favorite topic, or least favorite, depending on how you cut it. But I was just going to add to that the critical thinking is really the skill that's going to be most important, because I'll give an example of how bias can show up in these systems. Obviously, so much of what we're talking about here at Hope is economic empowerment, right? And Stanford did this study about 3 years ago that assessed predictive credit scoring models. So these were predictive models that looked at people's credit risk. And what it found was that the models were 5 to 10% less accurate for low-income families and for minority borrowers. So how does that happen? The way that happens is that for those low-income and minority borrowers, there was less data on their credit history. They often tended to have thinner credit history, and so there was less data for the algorithms to learn on. So it's not that the algorithms were independently biased against these groups, but what happens is now that those groups that already have barriers and limited access to things like credit, to wealth building, are now experiencing this secondary bias through the application of these models that are not only replicating, but in many ways inflating the bias and inequity that exists in society. So again, a lot of the work that we do at Cisco is really just challenging people's assumption that because it's a machine that it's going to be unbiased, or that it's going to be less biased than humans. Because in reality, it often reflects and inflates the bias that exists in our world, right? The issue is not always the algorithm. The core of the issue is us, right? It's our society. It's the inequalities that still persist in our society and how that shows up in our data that then these models are learning from. So I think the thing that people always ask is like, okay, well, what do we do about this bias and this uncertainty that exists in the model? And I think for me, what I always tell people is that it's important to kind of know enough to be dangerous, right? So understand the model well enough to critique it, and then to make really thoughtful decisions about where it should and should not show up. I always tell our employees that you are the expert in the work you do. And so you are best positioned to tell people how exactly AI should or shouldn't apply to that. I think a lot of people, because of the kind of workforce impacts that you're talking about, Chike, is, people feel this pressure to adopt AI that is in a way that is fear-based, in a way that is almost punitive, right? Adopt AI, learn it, or you're gonna go obsolete. And what I try to offer to people instead is, we should welcome as many voices as possible into this conversation, right? We need people who are not technical experts. I'm not a technical expert, right? My background is in inclusion, and I knew that voice needed to be at the table in the AI conversation. And so I think, it's incredibly important that we have lots of people making really thoughtful decisions about where AI should or shouldn't show up because of this bias and uncertainty that's really built into so many of these models.
We can clap, that's all right. And so you're bringing up the conversation about trust, which becomes very important, especially when there are concerns about biased data and these artificial intelligence systems are becoming a part of our lives in all these different ways. So Alyssa, when it comes to trust, banking is very, very important. This is my money. I have rent to pay. I got childcare. And so that really puts you all at the front lines of implementation and thinking about all these things. So how are you all preparing for the moment right now, what's coming?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will tell you that from a financial services standpoint, banking is a large area where AI can be a huge catalyst, but that comes with a lot of responsibility and one that we don't take lightly. And what we do at Truist is we start really with our purpose, mission, and values. Everything we do comes back to our purpose, mission, and values. And for us, it's building better lives and communities. Now, we don't just say that, we mean it. So when we think about new technologies that are coming out, what we do is we don't start with a rush to the end to say, where can we deploy AI? We say, where is the friction that our teammates, that our clients are experiencing? And how could AI as a potential tool in that toolkit be a solution that we can use? So once we understand, and again, starting with that base of having a purpose, mission, and values, you can then say, how do I remove friction from the system and put in a solution that can actually help my teammates better serve our clients? They have more time to spend with clients versus working through systems and screens. And then how can we help our clients? And this, to me, is the big area that we can create some equity. So if you think about clients who are non-native speakers, clients who have learning disabilities, perhaps they have impairments where it makes it difficult to read long documents. You can actually leverage AI to make their life easier, which gives them better access to financial tools and a leg up. So there's an equity component that I think is really important. Now, that only comes, and Chelsea, you hit the nail on the head, which I would have dropped my mic, but I think it would have made a lot of noise, with the component around it's based on what data you're feeding it. And so you have to start with more of a, I'll call it an inclusive panel. So when you're at the table and you're designing for a friction, you need your operations partners. You need your risk partners in lockstep with you. You need your clients. You need their voice to be there so that you're designing for a solution that fits what their need is. You have to really think through and plan before you ever start coding or asking AI to code for you so that you're truly designing for the problem. The big piece, too, is data. Data is one of my large passion points, but clean data is the unsung hero of AI. We have to make sure that the data that we're feeding our AI solutions, even our models, is clean, that it's gone through quality checks, that we can trust the data, because without trust, we can't then trust the outcome or the solution that we see, and we can't explain it. The other piece is the guardrails. So the risk and the governance that we're wrapping around these solutions. We would not allow someone to drive a car without going through a test to make sure that they know the rules of the road, they know how to read the signs, and they can react appropriately. AI needs the same governance structures and guardrails put around it. And guess what? You have to renew your driver's license, so you need the oversight and the monitoring on an ongoing basis with AI. And particularly with Gen AI, we need a human in the loop right now. We need to make sure that we are producing the outcomes appropriately. So we need someone on your teams, yourselves, even us as we use the solutions in our personal lives, we're that human to help decide, is that really the right call? So just keep that in mind as you think about the governance and the guardrails, and really kind of bring it back to the basics of what's that friction you're trying to solve, and let's make sure we have the right success system around it so that we can actually deliver for the end goal, which is obviously a better outcome for ourselves and our clients.
So we have an amazing opportunity right now because we not only have a panel full of leaders, but we also have a room full of leaders. And I think that the purpose of a conversation like this is for us to think about the challenges that we're facing, but also let's talk shop a little bit about how we turn this into opportunities. All right, so it's moving fast. It can often feel like AI is happening to us. How do we flip that? How do we make AI happen for us? How can we make AI happen with us? What are some of the things that you all are thinking about that we can be doing in this moment to really leverage this opportunity for benefit?
I'll maybe have three buckets of things. I think first, it is, I always have this phrase kind of, get the most in-demand skills from the most in-need people. So I think about the work that you do, which is literally we need every man, woman, and child in this country to understand these tools and be able to keep up their understanding over time. That should be a national educational imperative. So I started my career as an educator. I think right now we have a debate in, whether it be K-12, higher ed, about should AI be there. That's been decided. Because I'll tell you, the kids who have means will learn these tools. There are going to be kids who the only place they may learn it is in their school. And again, we would widen inequality. Now, again, we have to get it right. We have to make sure it's thoughtful. I say this as a parent now as well. When my kids use technology, they never use it without me. That's a rule we have in my house, whether it's a screen, whether it's anything else. But the answer can't be we're not going to do anything. So that's number one. And I think about that even, folks who are justice involved. How do we get them skills as they're coming out trying to be in this workforce? Yep. As one example of another group of people. So that's number one. I think number two is really me thinking about entrepreneurs, people who are going to purchase AI tools. Right now, there is no federal AI regulation. Most states don't have them. I see a leader from New York State who I know has been working deeply on these issues, California, of course, but there's no regulation. And right now, the only regulation on what AI companies do is the customer. And that may be some of you who are in this room. Yep. The questions you ask: where did the data come from? Tell me how you tested it. Hey, across these demographics, did you get the same accuracy of results? Right now, these are companies, and they will respond to what customers say they want. So you all who might be purchasing these tools, be careful and precise in your questions, because companies will respond. Last piece, and this is not really for anyone, but really for all of us. We talk a lot about AI, and AI, think about it, it's three ingredients. It's compute, being data centers, it's data, and it's the actual algorithms. But there's an entire economy around AI. Why is AI 1/3 of the S&P 500 if you look at it from a dollars point of view? It's because we have to build massive data centers to power the compute. That is an economy. Just to put it in perspective, I met a person building a data center that is 5 gigawatts. He said that I didn't know what it meant. And he said, the entire greater Philadelphia metro area uses 3.5. I'm building a data center that uses 5. That is massive construction. We need people to build that thing. We need people to man that thing. Usually from the data I've seen, you need about 5,000 people to build it, potentially 200 to 1,000 people to man it. Those are jobs. There's an entire economy around that. The power to power that thing. I don't know about you all, but I've seen my bills go up recently. But that's part of the reason. We're going to need massive amounts of power. Those are now new things to be built, new things to be laid, new things to be run. If you are in the Southwest, you need water, because water is used to cool server blades so that thing doesn't get too hot, so you can still run your chat or watch Netflix. Those are jobs and opportunities and entrepreneurial launch points that frankly need to look like the country. And so if you think about AI, don't just think about the parameters and the data and all this. There's all this other stuff required. And again, I'm thinking about our government leaders, I'm thinking about our business leaders. We need all those opportunities also to be reflected by people who reflect the country. So I would say, again, how do we make sure that you all as buyers are asking great questions? How do we get the skills to all the right people? And how do we think about the entire AI economy and make sure that it reflects the country?
Chike, you've opened a can of worms by talking about data centers.
Yes.
I have a lot of thoughts about data centers. One thing I think one of my team knows, one of my big pet peeves is when people say, ChatGPT is democratizing AI, or AI is democratizing X, Y, and Z. Democracy, by definition, is decision-making power in the hands of the people. And so when you have a small handful of very powerful people making decisions about AI and how it's deployed, I wouldn't call that democratic, right? I think democracy is what your organization is doing, right? Putting those skills and putting that knowledge in the hands of people. And so, I think one thing that I would say in terms of how do we make this something that that everyone really feels ownership of, I would say participating democratically, right? I come from a civic engagement background as well, and so I think there is no better time for local civic engagement than right now. How many of you all are based in Atlanta or are from here? Okay, there are several data center proposals in the Atlanta metro area right now. And I just found out, so I'm from Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. There are I see Ford as well. There are 4 data center proposals right now in my county. There's one 10 minutes down the road from my house that OpenAI is building. And so for me, as a citizen, as a resident, I'm thinking a lot about how we can actually ensure that those data centers are bringing economic opportunity to the people who actually live there, right? Because the promise of jobs isn't a given, right, with data centers. It's not a given that those jobs are going to be available. It's not a given that those jobs are going to go to people who live in that community. It's not a given that their utility rates aren't going to go up, right? That their drinking water resource isn't going to be diminished, right? So I think there's no better time than right now to really get involved at a local level and understand what's happening. This data center proposal near my house had been going on for months before it was reported by Bloomberg or by CNN, right? It was already so far down the line before it was even announced in any kind of national news, but my local news was reporting on it, right? Shout out to local journalism. But all of that being said, pay attention to what's going on in your own backyard and pay attention to what's happening in your community so you can make sure that it is benefiting the community and the people who live there.
Yeah, I love that. I think the piece that I'll pull the thread through on is the conversation. So that means that, first of all, we're all here having this conversation and learning. I don't think that we could say the same if you were to go back in time before electricity was created and that was coming out. What's the magic in it? Before an automobile was created, before the internet, it was magic. You're all leaning in, which is the first piece that's really important. And that's where we have to have those conversations and approach that with a level of care so that we can understand how much knowledge we have around these solutions, what the questions are that we have, and we really have to have that critical thinking embedded in those conversations to ask, well, what do we not know? What is the risk here? Let's boil it down to really the most simplistic piece, because at the end of the day, these are simplistic solutions. They're just newer technologies that we're not all as read in on. So knowledge is power, right? We have to learn about it. We have to figure out how can we use these to our advantage. And the most important piece is how do we think about, and especially for those of us who are here with Operation Hope, we care about the individuals who need help the most, who don't have a voice every day. And so being their voice, being the advocate to say, well, how's this going to impact this group? How's this going to impact my family, the individuals I care about, my colleagues, my coworkers, our clients? And so having those conversations is really important so that we make the right decisions. And I think just leaning in really hard, building that knowledge is the most important thing that we all can do right now.
Okay, I want to make sure that we have time for questions because I could feel them bubbling in the room. But before we get there, I want to ask each of you if there was one actionable thing for the folks that are in this room that you would say is very important for people to take very seriously, what would that thing be for you?
I'll say quickly, I would say if you are not comfortable using AI tools yet, start today. And if you are, find 3 people around you who aren't and help them learn to use them.
I guess I would say in addition to AI skills, think about your human skills too, because those human skills are going to be what's most important in this future of AI. That's what you hold on to. Is it your empathy? Is it your leadership? Is it your ability to build trust with people? That's something that nothing can take away. So really reflect on and think about and own your human skills as well.
I would add just activate on those insights. So what you learn about using the tools, how you think about the impacts, think about what are those frictions that you can remove in your businesses, in the communities that you serve, in your clients, and your teammates, and think about where could you activate AI to help start that improvement. All that we learn is wasted if we don't act on it, right? Rich data doesn't turn into wise data unless you actually activate on it. So that's what we want to do is we want to drive action. So think, what are the small things you could do? It could even be personal. How do you create better recipes? That's a really easy one you can use AI for. I use it all the time, especially when I'm low. So just think about the things that you can do and then have an action and try it. Start to test and learn within the right guardrails. That would be my ask.
And for the leaders in this room, who have already started to implement artificial intelligence in their business, in their family, the thing that I would urge is that we start to look ahead and start looking around the corner. Artificial intelligence is the moment that's happening right now, and right around the corner we have robotics, quantum computing, blockchain technologies, even space travel and business in space. I don't mean to get too far ahead, but I do think that
It's not too far ahead.
because it's 2 years away, right?
Correct.
I think that it's really important for the leaders in this room and at this conference at Operation Hope for us to start looking ahead and around the corner so that we can put our communities in a situation that the future technologies, these exponential technologies, are not only happening to us, but that we're in a position to lead those things. That the people in our communities, our children, our colleagues are the ones that are launching those businesses, that we're able to financially benefit from these things. And I think that when we start looking ahead and around the corner, that we're gonna put ourselves in a really great position. So let's take some questions. I got one right here. It's me with the mic. Okay, cool. We'll try to get 4 or 5 in, so let's be brief and let's ask questions instead of give comments.
Okay. I would like to ask all presenters, what is the most mind-blowing use of AI you had experienced so far? And the reason I ask that is because you don't know what you don't know, and it is amazing that it's affecting so many places on everything. We're talking from, I'm in the travel business, it's just amazing the change. Okay?
I'll go really quick. I think I was presenting at a conference last year, and someone did a demo of this tool that could basically take a video of you speaking English and turn it into you speaking Spanish or you speaking Chinese, and it looks like you're actually speaking that language, right? So it's not just the audio; it's your mouth is moving like you're speaking Spanish or Chinese or whatever language you want, right? And I thought that was fascinating because obviously, being a global company for Cisco, things like that have such incredible applications. And the inclusive AI part of my mind was like, oh my God, deep fakes. Right? It is a huge issue. Last year was a gigantic election year, not just in the US, but around the world. And we had an incredible issue with misinformation. So when people aren't aware that the technology is capable of doing that, how do you know it's not real? So, again, the promise and the peril, it's both, right? So I think there's incredibly powerful applications, but I'm always thinking about what is the other side of that? What does that look like in a different context?
I'll just say really quickly, I don't know if it's the most mind-blowing, but I think the most useful. It's become my tutor for a topic. So, all right, I want to assume I know nothing about quantum computing. Create me a syllabus with written, video, and web resources, and time it out over 10 weeks so that by the end, I am a mid-level expert. Go.
Absolutely.
And cite everything so that I know, so I can check to make sure that it's real and accurate.
Make sure you're a good teacher.
Yeah. I would echo that. I think the educational piece is huge, and the personalization that can come with it. Explain it to me like I'm 5. Explain it to me like I have 10 years of experience. So it's great.
I'm gonna go right here.
Hello, my name is Joy. With AI and just the building of it, it feels so much out of reach as far as I don't want to say out of reach, but just trying to figure out how the education comes in as far as me learning how to build what I'm trying to incorporate in my business instead of outsourcing to somebody else to build it for me. Is there forums for that where I can physically learn how to build what I need for my business?
Yeah, I will just say, and then would love to hear what my fellow panelists would add. In my local community, our community college, or even our public school system, our libraries are offering a ton of free resources, so that's a great one, especially to connect with others. The other piece is a lot of these the Gen AI solutions have a version that is free, and so if you have access to the internet, if you have a cell phone, you can actually go and use these solutions today at no cost and use it as an education tool at first, right? Because you're trying to build that foundation, ask it questions. Hey, teach me how to use ChatGPT. Teach me how to use ChatGPT. What are the best solutions? Teach me about prompt engineering. So that's what I would recommend.
want to talk a little bit more about the apparel side. I'm Jasmine. Can you talk a little bit up from the governance side as well from the company perspective? Are you building in structures around environmental racism when we're talking about data centers and that sort of thing, so we are not repeating the past?
I mean, I am not on the company side, but I think I would say, I think the real answer is it depends on the company. And I would argue it's a bell curve. I think honestly, if you looked at me and I would say, most companies are doing something, I think I would probably say there is more to be done across all the scores that you talked about. That's my most honest answer.
Yeah, I would say thank you for asking the question. First of all, it's incredibly important. At Cisco, we have a sustainability team. We also have a responsible AI team, and so they're always thinking about this question, right? I think for Cisco, when it comes to sustainability, we think about the scope of our impact, right? Scope 1, 2, and 3 for the environment, right? So it's not just thinking about the environment in the making of Cisco's products, but what happens when our products are put in the data center, what happens. So we think about our impact in that way. But I'll also say there's industry-wide change that needs to happen, right? I think there are good people working on good problems inside Cisco, but there's industry-wide policy that's needed for this to really happen. And I think in the US, we've seen it happening kind of on a state-by-state basis. And so again, that's why I like to emphasize getting involved at a local level, because those state and even local regulations and bills are really important for addressing those kinds of things.
All right, I'm gonna come here, and then I saw Sis' hand in the back, and then come to my brother over here, and that may be our time, but we're gonna try to get through it.
Yes, my name is Patricia Ross, and I wanted to first share with the entire class, the first thing you really want to do is make it, because it can be that personal assistant for you. As entrepreneurs, you want to, first of all, get the information in the system about you. You want to give it your bio. You want to give it your resume. You want to make it personal. Turn off the those control systems far as someone getting your privacy. So the only way that you can be able to do that is to first do that first. And then the more it gets to be familiar with who you are, your writing style, it can be used in your actual writing. It can be used, entrepreneurs are always looking for funding. Well, it can't write for you if it doesn't know you. So you've got to feed it the information and not be afraid to feed it that information.
Thank you, Sis. And she's available to teach you more right after this session.
Hi. So I work in public housing, and so we've been trying to explore ways to use AI in public housing. But I wrote my question so I wouldn't forget, given the constraints of HUD rules and cybersecurity requirements and limited public sector budgets, what advice would you give to public housing authorities to be able to incorporate AI into our business models?
So when I look at the big ones, Anthropic, OpenAI, almost daily I feel like they are launching some type of free partnership with some type of public service entity, community colleges, higher ed, K-12. I know housing authorities well. I used to work with Secretary Castro back in the Obama administration. You all should call one of those companies and say, hey, look, we are looking to improve the work that we do for the poorest people in this country. Again, the average family, at least when I first last looked in public housing, was making $14,000 a year. Poverty line is 27. Yeah, and so I'm sad I'm not out of date here. But that's just one example. I literally would pick up the phone and call, because I think that is an opportunity. I think the second thing is some of the skills stuff you heard. I actually think, because I know you all are not just housing, you're all providing skills and supports for people who are trying to improve lives, eventually move out of public housing if they so choose. I think I'm looking at this guy right here, and people like him, that is a ready-made place, because you all know where the people are. And in some ways, that's kind of the biggest thing for people who are trying to do good in the community. Where are the people who need us? You actually know. And so I actually think that there are some ready-made opportunities, but I would literally pick up the phone and keep calling one of these companies until one of them says, hey, let's talk. Because I see these opportunities every single day for folks in the public sector, partially for brand equity, partially because I think some of them believe in it, that you should take advantage of on behalf of the people that you serve.
I just want to add really, really briefly to that. I think it's yes, and I think there's an important piece around human in the loop, right? I think especially with housing, I think we're going to see that having more scrutiny with the regulation. So I would say pay close attention to the regulation that's happening, because the areas and the industries that are going to be regulated first around AI are those that most affect people's opportunity. So hiring as one of the first ones, but then things, again, like housing, credit, loans, banking, that kind of thing. I think because, again, they're already very regulated, we're going to see an increasing amount of regulation on AI decision-making in those fields. It's already, obviously a lot more prevalent in Europe. So I would kind of look around at the regulation to see what is and isn't being done in housing, just to make sure that we're, again, thoughtful decision makers around where AI should or shouldn't play a role in that. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to, again, automate some of the tasks that cause friction, right, like you said.
And let me just add one more thing. Let's go back to the human in the loop. There's the point of the people who work at your housing authority are also going to need to be, if they've not used these tools before, upskilled and reskilled, and that has to be part of the effort as well.
That's right.
So that's just another thing to think about, whether it's a provider or a community college or so on. So that has to be part of the task list as well.
Okay, this is our last question. It needs to be brief because folks are itching to get to that next panel.
Okay, real quick. So I work in the leadership and branding space, and my focus is on growth and AI innovation. So I build a lot of tech stacks, not only for my business, but for my clients. And we've been engaging with AI over the last year. So my biggest question is, A, how the heck are we supposed to deal with the bias that's built into AI? Half the time I can't even get him to generate images with minority people in the images. So you're saying build the data, give it the data. So I give it the prompts, I give it all the data, and it still won't give me a couple that's Black and Asian if I'm trying to do a marketing piece to reach out to people who are multicultural. So how do we address that? The second part of that question, which is a complete piggyback, and I'm done, which is if we're still dealing with a digital divide, how are we supposed to get people that barely have internet access to figure out how to implement AI? Just like the young lady down here was talking about how to build it into entrepreneurs, I'm trying to do that every day, and people are terrified, and I'm trying to transition from doing it for you to doing it with you and teaching you how to do it, and they don't have the access.
Yeah.
I can do the last piece really quickly. We have to use public institutions, schools, libraries, which is where people who are not on the wrong side of that divide usually are. Look at the work that this man does. That's where we have to start, because that's where a lot of those people are going to be.
Yeah, I think what I would just add is that last piece is huge. I live in a rural community. We do not have internet down our road. It's fun. What I would say is that we have to think about that supply chain. So we have to have access to the internet. You have to think about, for children, the Boys and Girls Club is a great asset in almost every single community to tap into. Much of the firms that you all operate and work with is a great one. Phones, for access to phones, that's another great thing. The piece that I would mention around the data is no model can create data or learn from data. It's fed data. So that means that what you are feeding that model, what you are feeding that AI solution is going to help determine the outcome, and you have to score it. So in the beginning, you can't just feed something and then kind of let it rogue, right? It has to have the guardrails, it has to have the decisioning, and so there's some things there, but I'd be happy to chat afterwards about some of the things I've learned along the way too.
Thank you all so much for your time. Let's give a round of applause for this amazing panel.